Ladies and gentlemen, today I would like to share with you about my study with the title of Language Practice and Language Ideology of Students and Teachers in Malaysian Secondary Schools. These are the content of my presentation of today. Let's have a look at the research background. The Malaysian government initiated many top-down education language policies since independence. These are to produce human resources with multiple language competence. One of the education and language policy, the PPSMI, for teaching and learning of science, mathematics, and English was implemented in 2003. This 11-year program was terminated after 9 years of implementation. The termination was caused by several factors, including complaints from various sections. Let's continue with the research problems. The Malaysian Education Ministry or the Educational Language Policy Maker might not have enough information. Therefore, the design and implemented policy terminated before the intended period before knowing the cause of the problem. The Educational Language Policy Maker might not have enough information about the language practice and the language ideology of the students and teachers in schools. Therefore, they do not know the needs, the values and attitudes of the targets they were serving. The Prime Minister and former Malaysian Education Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin gave a statement that I do not know the root of the problem as a result of the existing gap between language practice and language ideology of students and teachers in Malaysian secondary schools. This study aimed to compare the oral language practice of English and Malay of the students and teachers in Malaysian secondary schools and to compare the perceptions of students and teachers in Malaysian secondary schools towards English and Malay. In order to find out how frequent do the students and teachers use English and Malay orally in Malaysian secondary schools and how do the students and teachers perceive these two languages. Spolsky's theory of language management was applied in this study. According to Spolsky, when we would like to study a language policy, three components must be studied: the language management, language practice, and language ideology. Language management is the language policy. Language practice refers to a variety of language or languages used by a language user. Language ideology is the general and consensus set of beliefs about appropriate language and language use, the values or statuses shared by the members of the same speech community to the language or the variety. This study applied a mixed methods approach. The quantitative data was used as the primary data and the qualitative data was used as an embedded data. The secondary schools in Selangor were selected randomly. These comprise of 1 Chinese independent high school and 11 national secondary schools. There are 347 student respondents and 351 teacher respondents, 4 students interviewees and 6 teachers interviewees as the research target. 2 sets of questionnaires with 5-point Richter scales were used. 1 referred to never to 5 ways to indicate the frequency of using English and Malay in formal and informal settings. 1 refers to strongly disagree to 5 strongly agreed to measure the agreement of importance of the two languages. Interview sessions were audio recorded. The teachers were interviewed individually. Students were interviewed in pair. The average length of interviews for each student is about 25 minutes and for every teacher is about 40 minutes. The administered questionnaires were analyzed by using computer software SPSS. The descriptive and statistical analysis, that is the means, were used to measure the average frequency of language use and average agreement on the importance of the two languages. The inferential statistical analysis, that is the Kruskal-Wallis Hedge test, was used to find out the variance of language practice and language ideology of the students and teachers in Malaysian secondary schools. The interviewees were coded, the interview data was transcribed and analyzed according to themes. This figure shows the students of Chinese independent schools use English more frequent than the students of National Secondary School. The student respondents in Chinese Independent High School converged to use English orally to all their English teachers for educational purposes in the Just English Center. At the same time, English was used also by the students' respondents with their English teachers to show solidarity in the informal settings, such as at the canteen. The language practice of the student respondents in National Secondary School was determined by the ethnicity of their interlocutors. That is, they used Malay to Malay interlocutors, the dominant ethnic group of students and teachers in the school. The figure shows that the students' respondents of the National Secondary School use Malay more frequent than the student respondents of the Chinese Independent High School. The student interviewees in Chinese Independent High School use Malay to communicate with the 6 non-Chinese Malay language teachers. At the same time, their teachers who were proficient in Mandarin teach Malay bilingually in the classroom setting. On the other hand, the multiracial of teachers and students, the medium of instruction used by the teachers of National Secondary School during the teaching and learning process, provided chances for the student interviewees of the school to use Malay habitually. This figure shows the teacher respondents of Chinese Independent High School use English more frequent than the teacher respondents of the National Secondary Schools. The language use of the teachers in Chinese Independent High School was based on the professional of their interlocutors. However, the language use of the teachers in National Secondary School was based on the ethnicity of their interlocutors. The figure shows the teacher respondents of the National Secondary High School use Malay more frequent than the teacher respondents of the Chinese Independent High School. The ethnic backgrounds of the teachers serve as the determining factor of the language practice of the teachers in the studied National Secondary School, and the teacher interviewee in the Chinese Independent High School converged to respond in Malay to suit her interlocutor's need to show solidarity. The statistic analysis of variance show English language ideology of the student respondents of Malaysian secondary schools is not significantly different in all orientations, and the student interviewees in both studied secondary schools agree that English is important education language in tertiary education. The statistics analysis indicate a significant difference between the language ideology of student respondents in Chinese Independent High School and National Secondary School in instrumental orientation. The student interviewees in National Secondary School use Malay as a dominant communication language with all their schoolmates despite of Malay, Indian or Chinese ethnicity. This figure shows the English language ideology of teacher respondents in Malaysian secondary schools is significantly different in the integrative orientation. The teacher interviewees of the Chinese Independent High School agree with the importance of English for their students because English is used in international universities and the private sector. In addition, the teacher interviewee in the studied National Secondary School perceive English as important language also in Malaysian universities. According to the statistic analysis of variance, there is no significant difference of Malay language ideology among the teacher respondents in Malaysian secondary schools in all orientation. The teachers agree all Malaysians must know Malay because it is the official language in the country, and the teacher interviewee in the studied national secondary school perceived Malay is not only as a communicative language among all Malaysians, it is also the identity of the Malays in the country. The implication of this study shows that the teachers of Malaysian secondary school perceive Malay as national language, important communication language, and heritage language. English was perceived as the international language and education language in tertiary education. However, the language ideology did not show significant impact on the language practices of the teachers in Malaysian secondary school. English was perceived by the students as important for their future advancement. Important educational language in tertiary level and international communication language. But English was less practiced by the students in national secondary school than the students in Chinese independent high school. This shows that the language practice of the students was different from how they perceived the languages. This study unveiled the gap between language ideology and language practice towards the two languages by the students and teachers in Malaysian secondary schools. How the language users perceive the language did not influence their language use. This supported language belief is not language practice. The researcher would like to suggest the policymakers of the country should take into consideration about the gap between language ideology and language practice before they design and implement new language policies in the future. The English teachers are also suggested to use the language according to their profession instead of ethnicity. This is to uphold their image as a professional and to create more opportunities to the students to use the language in the formal and informal settings. Thank you.